Hi there, everybody. I'm Tony with the Hearing Loss Association of America Mission Viejo chapter. And we have a few new people that have registered to attend this program. It's important that everybody know that I am not a professional. I offer hearing loss support, and this is a peer support group. We are nonprofit. Nobody gets paid. And for myself, I'm a person with a hearing loss. I have a profound hearing loss, and I wear a cochlear implant on one side and a hearing aid on the other. So I identify with everybody that attends these meetings that identify as somebody with a hearing loss. So hello, everybody. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel. And the best way to get notice when it's available for viewing is to go to the website, go to the YouTube, look up Mission Viejo chapter, and subscribe. And when you watch the video, vote on it, do a hands up, and write comments. So that's available to you. Okay. My technical support is not here today. He is having his internet company is upgrading his neighborhood. He's without captioning, so he's not here. So we're going to miss Alan. I do want two things I want to point out to you. There is a chat box, and anytime you think of a question, you can write your question in the chat box, and at the appropriate time, we will answer it. And so you click on chat, and the window opens up, and it's addressed to everybody. You just type your message here and press return, and it'll show up at the bottom toolbar. I don't have a slide for this, but there is a reactions, and that is you can use that to raise your hand. We have quite a few people registered in this program. Only 24 people show up on the screen. So when we go beyond 24 people, I can't see everybody. So if you are personally raising your hand, I may miss you. So if you could use the raise hand feature, that would just help smooth out the program. Okay, make it easier for everybody. This is the disclaimer. HLAA Mission Viejo does not endorse any single product or service. This meeting is intended to provide information, education, and support. We have a sponsor. Our sponsor is Caption Call, and they've been sponsoring us since 2012. And they actually support the chapter by paying for our captioner. They provide a landline phone to your already connected home number, and they provide iPhone captions. And by the way, if you missed our last program, they introduced Olilo, which is their new captioned program for the smartphone, for iPhone and Android. And I love it. I just love it. So it's in your App Store or your Play Store. Look up Olio, O-E-L-O. That's okay. And also captions for your iPad. And it makes a difference if you are missing conversation on the phone, especially talking to doctor's offices. That's my biggest problem. Okay. There's our captioner, Jo Gale. She's here today. And you're seeing captions because she is actually working on her keyboard and producing captions. So thank you, Jo, for being here.
So tight.
2 more slides, quickie. Mission Viejo is a 501c3 tax exempt chapter, and any donations you may make are tax deductible depending on your tax situation. And I'm going to repeat, this is all volunteer. No one receives compensation, and we depend on your donations for your support. Our website, www.hlaamv.org. That's also the website you can go to get to our YouTube channel. There's an icon to click on for that. Also, there is a listing, and it's up to date, of all of the hearing loops that are available in Orange County. And as of last week, we got a new loop at Temple Judea on Mission Viejo. So they have a new hearing loop in their sanctuary. So we're just so pleased with that. I am the president. That's my email address, tony@hlaamv.org. If you would like to contact me, that's my phone number. You can text me and you can call me, but not right now. And again, the website is hlaamv.org. Okay. So we have today Oticon, who is a hearing aid manufacturer, and we have 2 people that will be participating. And so we have Chalese Buttars. She's an audiologist. Okay, here we go. I am going to. So there is Chalese, and then we have David.
No.
Okay. Chalese has been an audiologist for 8 years, and she's been with Oticon 3.5 years, and she provides education to professionals, consumers. So she's in the education department of Oticon. David is here. David, please tell me how to pronounce your last name again. I ask you this every time.
It's Majit. But whatever you're comfortable with, I'll answer to you, Tony.
You answered anything, huh?
Yes.
I apologize. People's names are so important, and I like to get it right. So, and I just love you dearly, David. So I wanted to get that right. Okay. So guess what? David has been an audiologist for 48 years.
Yeah.
And he's been with Oticon for 13 years. So you can see that we are bringing to you very experienced, knowledgeable people that will give us information that they've learned, and they stay in touch with the very latest. So I think we're going to open with Chalese. She's going to share her screen, and we're going to get going.
Sounds good. Thank you for that introduction, Tony. And Dr. Majit and I both appreciate being here. I always enjoy coming and having the opportunity to the HLAA group. So we have not done this for a while, so it's nice to be back here amongst what I would call old friends. So thanks so much for letting us be here. Dr. Majit, anything you want to say before I jump into what we have today? You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Still on mute.
It's an honor to be invited back. We really appreciate it. And I think, Tony, you being very modest. You know more about hearing and hearing loss than most professionals. So, and again, we appreciate you taking the time and all of the energy that you put in. into making this a very successful group that you run, and we couldn't be more pleased to be here. So thanks again to everybody.
Great. Now, today we're here to really kind of give you an overview on what has been updated with Oticon since we saw you last and had the opportunity to speak with your group. So I have a little bit of an introduction. I want you to understand about Oticon and where we got our start and what is important to us when it comes to the brain and what we call brain hearing. So we'll talk about that first. And then we're going to dive into new technology that Oticon came out with at the first of this year in February, actually. So we have new technology that's very new to the market. And I know all of you out there, if you're hearing aid users, want to know about what is new in the field and what do you have access to make your job in terms of listening a little easier. So we're going to go over that information today. And then at the end, if we have some time, I just want to quickly go over a little bit about connectivity. As Dr. Majit and I have done these trainings in the past, it seems like most of the questions come up actually around connectivity, and that's where a lot of interest is at. So I'll give you an overview of what connectivity options Oticon has. And if you have any questions as we go along, I will keep my eye on the chat box, and I will have Dr. Majit keep his eye on the chat box. And we would like to try to answer questions as we go along today, because I know how it feels to have a burning question and want an answer and have to wait till the end. So we won't do that. We'll try to answer as we go along. Now, to give you kind of an overview of Oticon in general, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but I think it's important for you to understand where Oticon came from. So, interesting story about our history. In 1902, there was a coronation for Queen Alexandria in the UK. And Queen Alexandria wore some type of hearing device. Who knows what it really looked like at that time, but wore some type of device to try to help her hear better. In Denmark, there was a man who you can see here, his name's Hans de Mont, who heard that Queen Alexandria had worn this hearing device, and he wanted to try to help his wife, Camilla, be able to hear better because she was having some issues and some problems with hearing. So in 1903, he decided to go over to the UK, learn a little bit more about that, and then he went back to Denmark, and that's where our company, de Mont, which is kind of the overall company, got started at that time. So Oticon has really been in the hearing aid industry and the hearing device industry for a very, very long time, which means that we have had a long time to be able to work on our technology and to get it to where it is today. Now, before some of you jumped on the presentation, Tony, myself, Dr. Majit, were talking about hearing aid technology and how far it has come. The things that hearing aids can do these days are amazing in terms of how they can help you hear better. So I'm going to go over a couple of things that we have improved upon a little later on in the presentation. And one of the other things that Oticon really focuses on is research. Now, research is important because if we didn't do research, then our hearing devices would stay stagnant. If we had the same hearing devices, the same hearing aids we had in the 1970s or the 1960s, or even in the early 1900s when Oticon kind of got its start, then we wouldn't necessarily be able to perform individuals with hearing loss as they can today. Hearing aid technology has improved. Things have also gotten smaller, which is a nice thing, but also just the way that the hearing aid can take a sound and make sure that you have access to it has improved significantly as well. And a lot of that is based off the research, what we know about the brain, what we know about processing sound, and all of that information is taken and we look at that to try to develop a better hearing aid for you. So when you're in a noisy listening environment, you can perform to the best of your abilities. And so research is very top of the mind when it comes to Oticon, and I'll actually talk about some research outcomes we have for our new product later on. Now, whenever I have the chance to speak to an HLAA group, I usually like to try to talk about how we hear. Hearing is such a fascinating thing because whenever we think about hearing, we think about our two ears and what we can see. Now, this is the organ of hearing, being able to actually hear and understand that there is sound, but it is the brain that is the most important part of processing and understanding what is being said. So hearing and understanding are two kind of completely separate things. We need to be able to hear in order to be able to understand. Yes, Tony?
Can you just slow down a little bit?
Sure. Yep. I will definitely try. Okay. So when it comes to hearing and understanding, there is a hierarchy of hearing. So the basic kind of tenet of hearing is being able to detect that there is a sound, and then to be able to discriminate that there's a difference between sound, like is it a guitar or is it maybe a drum? And then it's the ability to understand and identify what a sound is. And then the highest part of that kind of hierarchy is understanding and comprehending what is said. Now, when it comes to that, we want to ensure that the sound that we are processing through the hearing aid, once the hearing aid mic picks up that sound, that we can try to give the brain the best support possible in order to have that highest part of that hierarchy, which is the comprehension and the understanding. And so when we build devices, that is the most critical thing that we are looking at. How can we support the brain? When you look at Oticon, Oticon has had this trademark term that we have used since 2014. And this trademark term, we call it brain hearing. Now, what does that actually mean? When you look at brain hearing, this is not just a marketing term that Oticon uses. It goes much more than that. When we have engineers who are working at Oticon in the lab, those engineers are creating devices, and they're creating what we call signal processing features. Now, there's a lot of technical information that we could get into to learn more about signal processing that we're not going to go into today. But essentially, when you think about a hearing aid, it is much more than just a microphone picking up sound and amplifying it. There's a lot more that happens in that pathway of processing before you actually have it presented into your ear canal and before you hear. There are things like directionality, noise reduction, transient noise management, wind noise management that tries to ensure that the sound you are getting is cleaned up for you and that you have as complete of a picture as possible once that sound reaches your brain. We know that hearing aids can only do so much to ensure that you get the signal possible, and then your brain has to try to take that information and process that as well. So when Oticon talks about brain hearing, what we mean is we are creating devices that we are trying to make sure clean up the signal and give you the best possible effort to be able to hear and communicate and understand and be a part of your everyday life. Now, when we think about hearing, though, one of the hardest parts, and I'm sure many of you probably have some experience with this, is the amount of effort it takes to actually listen and hear and comprehend. One of the things that Oticon often looks at and researches is something called listening effort. And I'm actually going to present to you some data a little later on in the presentation that looks at listening effort. But essentially what this is, if we take someone that has normal or typical hearing thresholds and they go into, let's say they're at their home and they're having a conversation, they don't really have to put a lot of effort into listening. It's this kind of very passive thing. They can be doing other things. They don't necessarily have to put a lot of effort into that. When somebody starts to get a hearing loss, there's more and more effort that has to be put into trying to hear and comprehend, because the brain is not getting as complete of a sound picture as possible. Hearing aids can try to make sure to supplement that so we can give more of a complete sound picture. The brain doesn't have access to all of the details as it would with somebody with typical hearing thresholds. So because of that, the brain has to then work harder to try to fill in the gaps, which takes effort. It can make you tired by the end of the day. And then what we also know about that is if the brain has to put effort into listening and understanding and comprehending, then there's less ability for you to remember and recall a conversation later. So if you think about, you went to lunch with a friend and you're trying to remember what it is they said, sometimes you have maybe issues with recalling that information because you were putting so much effort and brain power into just listening in that moment. And so one of the things that we work to try to do is make sure that we can give you the support you need so you don't have to put in as much listening effort. And I have some data on that I'm going to share with you in just a little bit. Now, when we look at the new Oticon technology, because that's what we're here to share to you today, what is new on the market and how are we improving? The new Oticon technology that came out in February is called the Oticon Reel. And the Oticon Reel gives some very unique and very specific patient benefits that we're really excited about. And since it has come out, we've heard really positive feedback on this. So Tony, if you want to run the polls, do you mind running the first 3 poll questions that we have?
Chalese, you go ahead and do it.
Okay.
Just we just have just a short amount of time though for each to wait for the answers. And I would like, and once you do it, if you would show everybody the
Sure,
results.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll wait about 15 seconds if that's okay. So let me launch the first question. And the first question, just to get a general understanding of who we have on today, is do you wear hearing aids? Yes or no? And I'll give you about 10 or so more seconds and then I'll share those results with you.
Okay, I'm not seeing it.
I haven't ended the poll yet, so sorry. Once I end the poll, then I can share the results, Tony, if that's okay. All right, let me end the poll and I'll share the results. So it looks like if you should be seeing that on your end, Tony, now.
On my end, I'm not seeing the question and I have at all.
How about now?
No. Let me try something. Let me try it.
Okay.
Yes, we do see the screen.
You do see that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I
I
am
see it too.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. So in sharing the results with you, you can see that 91% of you on today do wear hearing aids and 9% are not. So thank you for that. That's helpful to get an idea of who we have on. So our next poll question that I want to ask has to do with sudden loud sounds. So the question is, have you ever had a sudden sound in your environment that you found to be uncomfortable? Yes, you have, or no, you haven't. And to give you an idea of some of the sudden sounds that we hear about in offices, those would be like doors slamming, dishes clanging, those types of things. I'll give you about 5 more seconds. All right, let me end the poll and I'll share these results with you. Looks like 92% of you have said yes, you have found a sudden sound within your environment uncomfortable, and 8% have said no. All right, before I move on, one last poll question I wanted to get your input on. And that is, okay, how well do you feel your hearing aid performs in wind noise? Not very well, okay, or very well. And when I talk about perform, I'm talking about you being able to hear speech if you're having a conversation with a friend on a windy day, or the annoyance and loudness of the wind noise. And I'll give you about 5 or so more seconds on this. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So it looks like 33% said not very well, 52% said okay, and 14% said very well. So thank you for that information. That is very helpful to know. Now, some of the reason why I asked you those questions is the Oticon Reel that came out in February, again, is Oticon's top level of technology. And the things that we have improved upon are being able to better deal with sudden loud sounds and sudden soft sounds. So in hearing aid technology, in the past number of years, there's been something called transient noise management, which means if there is a dish that clangs in the kitchen, as part of the hearing aid mechanism, we try to clamp down on that sound. And that's existed in hearing aids for quite some time. But not all hearing aids have been very effective at doing this. And some people need more attenuation, so to turn down the volume of those sounds more than others. And so this is one of the things that the Oticon Reel has improved upon. We've also improved upon sudden soft sound attenuation. And what is a sudden soft sound? Anytime somebody clicks a pen, or maybe you have a dog, and when the dog walks across tile, or a clock in your house sits there and ticks, hearing aids often take those sounds and turn up the volume. So what happens is they're kind of in your face, in the foreground, not really what you want to pay attention to. And instead, we are now making sure that those sounds are turned down and that they're more comfortable. You should still hear them because they're part of your environment, but they're not going to be in your face. The other thing is wind noise. Being able to make sure you can understand speech if you're in a windy environment, but to also bring down the amount of wind noise that is created. So those are the two things we've improved upon with wind. And then handling noise. Some of you may know what handling noise is, some of you may not. But handling noise is anytime something touches the hearing aid microphone, that is called handling noise. So if you have hair that rubs against the microphone and you can kind of hear that scratching, or maybe you put on glasses, or if some of you are wearing masks still, having masks put on, that annoying noise that is created in the hearing device. So with the Oticon Reel, these are the 4 things that we have significantly improved upon in our hearing devices that we feel is important. Now, let's say that some of you are out and about and you're doing things and you're running up against some of these things. Maybe you're walking on the beach, or maybe you're playing golf and you're trying to have a conversation with somebody, and all of a sudden the wind comes and it kind of takes down the speech of your friend or your partner or whoever you are with. These are things that hearing care providers may hear complaints about. Or if you're at a restaurant and somebody has cutlery on the plates, all of those types of things are complaints that hearing care providers may hear from their patients. And if you go in and you see your audiologist or your dispenser and you have one of these complaints, it is then kind of up to them to figure out, how can I make this better for my patients? And when that happens, sometimes they just kind of have to turn down the volume of the hearing aid a little bit. We call it the gain of the hearing aid. And if they do that, it can also then affect subsequent conversations you're trying to have. It could affect the access that you have to speech information because they're trying to fix one thing and it makes another thing maybe a little bit worse. So what Oticon has done with this hearing aid is, instead of kind of having this trade-off, we have worked to ensure that the patients can still have access to speech. They can have the clarity of speech when they get into these environments, like a windy situation or when there is a sudden sound, but then they can also have comfort as well. And that is something hearing aid manufacturers work to try to do, is make sure there's not a trade-off between these things, but give both speech clarity and comfort at the same time. So when you're in these environments, you can be a part of conversation and be comfortable as well. Now, looking at some of the research that we have behind the new device, one of the things that we looked at was something called listening effort. And I know this graph looks somewhat technical, so let me kind of bear with me as I explain it. Oticon uses something called pupillometry to look at listening effort. And pupillometry, what it is a way to objectively measure how much effort somebody puts into a task. I can take a machine and measure the size of somebody's pupils to see how much effort they're actually putting into some type of task. And so what Oticon did is we took 29 individuals and we had them use this new feature and listen to some sentences and repeat back these sentences. At the same time, we also had a sudden sound that would play over the sentence. So maybe a door banging, a dog barking, that type of thing. When this feature was engaged, compared to when it was not engaged, the amount of listening effort that was decreased because of this feature was 22%. So as this person is listening to sentences, when there is a sudden sound, this feature allowed the amount of effort they had to put in to this listening task to decrease by 22%, which is a really big deal, especially when we think about people going into restaurants. There are often sudden sounds that are happening, and you're usually trying to have a conversation. So if we can decrease the amount of effort you have to put into a task because of this feature, it is something that we're really excited to be able to do and to be able to show as well. Now, the other thing that we have looked at as well is how well are our hearing aids compared to two other the manufacturer devices in the market performing when it comes to wind noise. Now, with wind noise, what happens is, and many of you know because you're wearing hearing devices, you go outside on a windy day, the wind comes into the hearing aids, can create kind of an artifact that can mask the speech. And so you're trying to walk down the street on a windy day and have a conversation. You're not only bothered by that noise, but it can affect your ability to understand speech as well, coming from your friend. So what Oticon did is we wanted to look at how do the Oticon Real devices do when it comes to decreasing wind noise, but also giving clarity of speech. So those were the two things that we looked at, and we compared Oticon Real to two of our top competitors within the market. To do this study, we had 10 different participants, and we went to this huge wind tunnel. And with this wind tunnel, it was a turbine, and it created a ton of wind that we had individuals basically sit in front of the tunnel and had the wind coming at them. Down at the bottom of the floor, there was a speaker that was playing sentences. And these individuals were asked to rate on a tablet what they thought about how loud the wind noise was and what they thought about what the clarity of speech was that they were listening to. When looking at the results, Oticon Real performed well when it came to loudness of wind noise, but also clarity of speech in wind. Competitor 1 had 22% louder wind noise than the Oticon Real, but performed well in terms of clarity of speech. Competitor 2 performed well in terms of the loudness of the wind noise, but had 17% less clear speech than the Oticon Real. So when we look at this data, what does it tell us? The new Oticon Real is really the only device comparing to these two manufacturers that was able to do both attenuation of that wind noise to make it more comfortable, but also give that speech clarity as well in the presence of wind. Now that is a little bit about the new Oticon Real. And if you look at what types of models it is available in, because I'm sure that that's probably something that you think about when you're looking for a new hearing aid, the models that we have, one is called the Mini-Right R, which is rechargeable. And the Mini-Right just has a small wire that fits into your ear. Mini-Right T is a non-rechargeable version. So some of you may like rechargeability, some of you may want non-rechargeable, and you have both options. We also have a Mini BTE hearing aid. It has kind of a standard tone hook with an ear mold. And so some of you may be using Mini BTEs or receiver in the ear. But the point is, when you go to your provider, they have a number of different choices that they can choose from if your hearing loss falls within a category that this device can go ahead and fit. And one of the other things I want to say, because I know t-coils are still important, there is still place for t-coils, and I want to make it very clear that all 4 of these hearing aid models that you see on the screen do have a hearing aid t-coil in them automatically, which means your hearing care provider doesn't have to think about if it has a t-coil or not. They all come with a t-coil in them, which is great and important. If you do like rechargeable solution and you want a rechargeable solution, here we have our regular desktop charger, and then we also have a smart charger. The smart charger has a lid, and it is a charge on the go solution, which means you can plug it into the wall, charge this smart charger because it has its own battery, and then you can unplug it from the wall and have 3 days of charge for that. And I don't know, Dr. Majit, are you answering that question in the chat box, or did you want me to go ahead and address that?
Well, it might be, I'm typing, but it might be a question that you should address so the entire audience would be able to benefit from your answer.
So, I mean, it's a great question. Who were the other two hearing aids that you tested against with the wind? Did we cherry pick the others to make Oticon appear better? Great question. And unfortunately, I can't really talk about who the other manufacturers were. But what I will say about the question to the cherry picking, that is a perfectly great question. Makes sense that you would ask that. When Oticon does these competitor studies, because we've looked at other things as well in the past, we actually compare it to our top competitors in the market. So with that being said, I would say that there is not a cherry picking because they are our strongest competitors, which would suggest that they have some of the best technology as well on the market. So we're not going to kind of some obscure manufacturer, if you will, and comparing against that. They are our two top competitors in the market. And then another question was, how long does a charge last? Great question. How many hours? So our charge lasts a full day's use. So if you use the hearing aid, you should get full day's charge. That means 24 hours. However, if you are somebody who streams and you use Bluetooth, you stream phone calls, you stream whatever from the phone, that is going to cut down a little bit on your battery life as well. So let's say you stream 4 or so hours, they may cut down on your battery life down to 18 hours. Another factor in this can also be how loud of environment you're in. That's going to take more battery power for the hearing device, and then your degree of loss as well. But with that being said, to also answer this, I will say that Oticon, I have yet to have any patients deal with battery issues with the new hearing aid batteries. There was one person, but I think it was a user error. They were new to hearing aids, and I don't think they were putting it on the charger correctly. Now, as you know, just like it is with your phone uses lithium-ion battery, and maybe 2 or 3 years after you've had the phone, the battery doesn't last as long. One of the things about Oticon's rechargeable hearing aids that is not the case with any other manufacturer is those rechargeable hearing aid batteries can be changed in your provider's office, which is a huge convenience for both you and the provider as well. So if you ever notice that your hearing aid batteries are not lasting as long as they used to, if it's a rechargeable solution, go into your hearing care provider and see what they can do to try to help with that. All right. Now, one last thing about the Oticon Reel, we do have a new color, which I'm excited about, and it is the olive green that you see here on the screen. So if some of you are kind of looking for a slightly out of the box color, the olive green is now available in our rechargeable style, which is pretty exciting. So that's a little bit about the new Oticon Reel that has launched in February. We also have a new device that we didn't talk about since we met with you last, which is our custom solutions, or which are our custom solutions. Oticon Own is a line of custom devices that launched last year in August. When we look at custom devices, we know nobody is the same as somebody else. Everybody is different. And so the beauty of a custom device, as all of you most likely know, it's something that can be made to fit your ear specifically. So if you're looking for a solution that is not a behind the ear solution, that has all of the mechanisms or the components inside the ear, that is a custom solution. Now with custom solutions, there are lots of different things that you need to consider if this is what you're going to go for. Some of you have different degrees of hearing loss. Some greater degrees of hearing loss in the severe and profound category. A custom solution most likely is not going to be an appropriate option because it can't get loud enough, and you may run into more feedback or whistling issues simply because of how close the microphone is to the output of the device. So that's something that you and your audiologist or hearing care professional can consider. Sometimes if people have dexterity issues, you find it hard to put the hearing aid on and in your ear, a custom solution can actually be a little bit easier for those individuals because it's just one solid piece. The other thing that we know about custom devices is not all custom devices can have the same whistles, bells and whistles that other hearing aids can have. Because of sizing constraints and all types of other things, some devices cannot have Bluetooth technology if they're too small because of the antenna of the Bluetooth. So when you're looking at a custom device, there are a lot of other factors that need to be considered between you and your hearing care professional when deciding if this is an appropriate solution for you to have or not. Now, looking at what these custom devices look like, at least for Oticon, here are your custom devices that we have at Oticon. Again, the family specifically is called Oticon Own, and there are a number of levels of technology, and you can also see here that there are different styles as well. Some individuals like to have something very small and discreet. This option can be very, very, very small and fit so deep into the canal that you can't really see it on the outside. Some individuals like to have something a little bit larger, and you can see they increase in size. Now, just as a general perspective, when you have smaller devices like this, there's usually less that those devices can do in terms of signal processing, cleaning up the signal that's coming into the hearing aid, but also in terms of Bluetooth and connectivity. As the devices get larger, there's more that the hearing aid can have in it in terms of components and more bells and whistles. So that's just something to remember when you're looking at a custom solution. Now, if you have questions on our custom solutions, please feel free to post those in the chat box. Just a few things I wanted to say about connectivity before we open it up to more questions. With connectivity, this is something that has really, I think, given an improvement in terms of quality of life for some individuals, because just simply being able to take a phone call from your cell phone and have that directly put into your hearing aids, that can make your phone calls and your ability to connect with others a lot better. And especially during the pandemic, being able to still stay connected with people and to hear and understand was a very big deal. Now, the only other hard part about connectivity is sometimes connectivity is not seamless. And sometimes connectivity can have glitches or can have difficulties with that, which I'm sure some of you have probably run across. Now, with Oticon's hearing aids, you have the ability to connect your phone directly to your hearing devices. Not all phones can connect directly. When it comes to the Android side of things, some of those phones are not able to connect as seamlessly as iPhones. If it is a newer Android phone from 2019 and on, usually those phones can more easily connect to the hearing aids directly without needing kind of another component or another piece. With certain iPhones, so iPhone 11 and newer, Oticon has the ability to have hands-free calling, which means your phone can connect directly to the hearing aids, so you can stream your call to the hearing aids, but it also then means the hearing aid microphone can pick up the voice of the person wearing the devices. So instead of needing to use the microphone of the phone, it is the microphone of the hearing aid that picks up the voice to send it to the person on the other end. Hence the reason they call it hands-free. No need to pick up the phone and use the microphone. So this is kind of a two-way streaming that we call it. And again, it's iPhone 11 and newer that are compatible with this hands-free communication. We also have a number of accessory options available, from our Connect Clip, which is a remote microphone solution. So if you're going out to eat with your friend, you give them the Connect Clip, that's the microphone, and so you can be able to hear and have that direct access. TV adapter to be able to stream from the TV, and even the remote control that can help change programs and volume if you're not wanting to use our Oticon app. Our Oticon app is the last thing that I want to talk about today before we open it up to questions. With the Oticon app, you have the ability to download this for free, as you do with most other manufacturers as well. And you can have this to be able to use as a remote control functionality, to change volume, to mute, to change programs, those types of things. Now, the companion app is a new app to Oticon. It used to be called the On app, and now we launched a new one in February called the Companion app. As part of this, we also have our remote care technology, which is Oticon's telehealth solution, meaning if you want to connect to your provider from the comfort of your own home, you can download the Companion app and actually connect to your audiologist or to your hearing aid dispenser so they can make changes to your hearing devices. Now, not all hearing care professionals are signed up for remote care, and so you'd need to talk to them to see if they have that functionality, but it's all done now through the Companion app. Now, with all of this being said, I think this is a very important thing to point out, and Tony and Dr. Majit and I were talking about this before many of you got on. You can have the very best technology that is out there on the market, but if you do not have a hearing care provider that knows that technology and can help guide you on your journey, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have the best outcomes. So when you look at the hearing care provider, it is important to know and to have some type of feedback that they are doing a good job with that technology. Oftentimes, if you have word of mouth, maybe you have a friend or a family member who has gone and who has good outcomes, it's usually a pretty good indicator. I would also look online to see if they have evaluations and if they have reviews. That is also usually a pretty good way to get some idea on how well that company is doing. And I would also ask them how familiar they are. If they recommend Oticon, if they recommend another manufacturer, how familiar is that clinic with that technology? Because it's a matter of fitting a number of those devices and really understanding how they work and how they can help you as part of the fitting software. And then one of the things that you often too want to look for is the clinic doing real ear measurements? That can give you an idea of if they are following, to some extent, best practices that we have in the market. Now, with that being said, I apologize. I did try to speak a little slower, so I'm hoping that you could all understand me, and thank you very much to the captioner as well. Dr. Majit, anything else you want to come on and say, and we can start addressing some questions?
Sure.
And Tony, any input?
Just to reiterate and emphasize what Dr. Buttars had mentioned, again, it is so important that you choose a facility, a clinic that you're comfortable with, and that will have you come back to do checkups, to do adjustments, to do cleanings. Because once you're fitted, that's the beginning of the process. It's not the end of the process. And one should have their hearing aids anywhere from 3 to 8 years or so. And so with that said, if you want to be able to perform as well as possible, you need to have that relationship that you build with that facility. So again, I would emphasize, again, that the proper testing is done to make sure that the instrument is fit as well as possible and that you're able to go back when needed for services that they can accommodate you with. So again, that's very important.
Thanks, Dr. Majit. Looks like we have some questions here. So Susan asked, how much can the wearer adjust the sound balance, etc., individually on their phone? Or can only the audiologist adjust the patient's hearing loss for the patient's hearing loss? So great question. And that's really going to differ by manufacturer. And you probably know that, but just in case you don't, each manufacturer has their own app. And some of the apps that are out there on the market allow you as a patient to have more control and functionality. Oticon's philosophy is very much, we want to ensure that our hearing aids can be as seamless in your life as possible. We do not want the app to just have to be this separate extension that if you're not doing well, you have to go and make all of these adjustments. We want the hearing aid to be able to understand what environment you're in, How can it help support you? So when you look at Oticon's app comparatively, I would say that our app is not necessarily as robust in terms of adjustments that can be made, like fine-tuning and things by the patient, because we really feel like you shouldn't have to live your life in the app. You should be able to have hearing aids that are seamless for you. There are things you can do on the app, though, in terms of changing the balance for streamed sound. So let's say you're listening to music and you want a little more bass. You have the ability to go in and change that sound balance, which is one of the things you asked for specifically.
And you can also change the volume, or if you have more than one program, you can change that. But again, as Dr. Buttars just mentioned, the idea is that these hearing aids respond so quickly. They do 500 analysis a second. And so they can make the adjustments and the appropriate adjustments much faster than you can, because the environment is usually changing over time. So we would say that that if the instruments are programmed correctly, getting back to the profession that you're dealing with, you should use them as glasses. You should be able to put the hearing aid on and forget about it until you're ready to take them off at night. And that means you've got a very good fit, you're using a very good hearing aid, and it makes your life much simpler and easier throughout the day.
All right, there's another question from Stephen, and he asks, can hearing aids compensate for hearing problems created by the wear and tear of the auditory nerve and or the auditory hair follicles? So this question is a little tricky. When you go see a hearing care provider, there is what we call a battery of tests that we can look at. One that you're probably very familiar with is putting headphones on or inserts and clicking the button when you hear something. Now, earlier on, I talked about the hierarchy of hearing, where the basic foundation is detection, and that's what you're doing when you're clicking the button when you hear a threshold. But higher levels of processing require that your system to be working very well. So being able to identify what something is, discriminate, and actually comprehend. And when we start to have damage, that starts to get into more of the inner hair cells and up the auditory nerve, and even within the brain and how the brain is processing, there's only so much that can be done by hearing aids. Hearing aids can't go in and correct that if there is a wear and tear, as you say, of the nerve or of the inner hair cells or the brain. But what hearing aids can do is ensure that the signal that is going in is as clear and complete as possible. And so we kind of look at it as something like, we want to be able to set you up for as much success as possible based on your anatomy, your physiology, how your hearing system is working. So to some extent, there's not always something that we can do. One of the things you can look at in that test battery is a word recognition score or speech and noise scores to give you an idea of what your system is able to actually be capable of. And then based on that, hearing aids can take sound and try to give it the clearest picture possible for your brain to then be able to do something with that information. So looking at some of those test batteries can be helpful. All right, yes.
Just to add in to this, and that's why wherever you decide to go, you should always get at least a 45-day evaluation period, because what one instrument may work for someone very well, that same instrument may not be for you, or may not be programmed correctly for you, or you may judge it not to be as much benefit or value as what it's costing you. So it's very, very important wherever you go to check out hearing aids. You should always deal with an office that allows you a 45-day evaluation period. And during that time, your brain will have the time to adjust, and you'll be able to make a good decision whether that's the right instrument for you and your lifestyle.
So the next question on here is, background noise such as a restaurant is my biggest problem. Does the Reel address this? So, and honestly, that's probably the majority of problems for the majority of individuals is background noise and being able to hear and understand. So in the Oticon Reel device, there are definitely mechanisms to try to help improve upon that. things like directionality or noise reduction that take the signal, understand what speech is, and try to emphasize speech, and all of the other sounds that are deemed to be noise. Hearing aid can identify that and bring that down to some extent. The new technology in the Oticon Reel, that sudden sound stabilizer, can help do a better job, like at a restaurant, when there is actually a lot of sudden sounds that you wouldn't necessarily think, but people eating on cutlery or eating on plates, having cutlery hit plates, all of these types of things that are constantly happening, a door opening and slamming, are things that can take your attention away. So that new feature specifically can definitely, if there are sudden sounds within your environment, help you to some extent have more ability to have that clarity or access to speech in those environments.
Chalese, there was a question about pricing. I'm going to ask Anne Mundell-Noel. I know that you're on this call. Would you mind addressing that question for everyone about pricing?
Well, I did put it in the chat box.
I saw that. Yeah,
basically saying that the question was, may I ask how the pricing compares with other hearing aids, such as your competitors' pricing? And I will say that the individual offices set the pricing. It is not set by Oticon. So you have to look at each individual office for the price. However, the Oticon Reel in our office is set the same pricing as we previously had with the More. So although things are getting more expensive in the world as far as supplies are concerned, we have maintained the same pricing structure as we previously had.
Thank you, Anne. Appreciate it. Are there any other questions that we can address for you?
Tony has her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi, I have something, I wanted to say. You just heard Anne Mundell-Noel speaking about pricing. And for people that are new to us today, Anne is a local audiologist, local to Laguna Woods, Orange County. And actually, there's some people that come quite a distance to see her. So she does provide the Oticon hearing aid products. I also want to say that Anne has been a dedicated audiology advisor for the Mission Viejo chapter, and also with the Hearing Well Club, which we've kind of merged. And she's been doing this over 10 years. And in that process, she has spent a lot of time in our meetings when we're meeting in person. She makes herself available on Zoom and just about any time. And she's just very helpful. And as it turns out, without any pushing, she sees a lot of our members. So Anne Mundell-Noel, she's in Laguna Hills, and her office is by the Trader Joe's. And I just want to mention that. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you for that, Tony. And I just want the members here to know my passion is to help people with hearing loss, but that you, wherever you go for your hearing, you should feel like you can trust your provider and that they have your best interest at heart. So when you go to different offices, we encourage patients to shop around and see what the differences are, because as David pointed out, how the devices are fit is night and day on how you will respond and how well you will do. You only do as well as I fit your hearing aids.
I would like to tell a little story, and it won't take long. So my mother is 96 years old. She lives in San Diego, and she got Oticon hearing aids from a audiologist in San Diego. And she kept putting them in the drawer, and I kept putting them in her ears. And she says, but I can't hear you. And we took, she was coming up to visit me. So we're in the car. She really can't understand anything I'm saying. And so we took her into Anne, and Anne put her through the drill of all the important tests that you don't normally get. And she instantly started hearing. And when I drove her home, we had a normal, natural conversation in the car like we haven't had in years. She could understand everything I said. So I think because of all the testing that she does, and she listens to the patients, so she also gets their feedback, and that helps her with the adjustments. So I'm just saying, wherever you go, you want your audiologists to provide best practices testing and pay close attention to what you're saying. So wherever you are in the country, that's the kind of hearing healthcare provider you want. You get more for your money that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Really appreciate your input, and I'm delighted to hear about your mom. Success.
Yeah, the other thing that I want to say is that there is a difference between those patients who are wearing the Oticon more and the real, that we have fit several patients who have tried both hearing aids, and there definitely is a significant difference in the sound quality of the real, even over the more, which is a great product. So anyone who has a lesser, older model of the Oticon, maybe the Alta or the OPN, come in and have a test drive or a listening demonstration, because I think you would hear the difference in the technology.
The other thing I would mention is that although Dr. Buttars and I work with Oticon, I never think it's a good idea to go to an office that just deals with one manufacturer, because not one manufacturer is going to be best for all individuals and their lifestyle and their hearing losses. So you want to be able to have a choice of what's going to be best for you. And so when you have someone who just deals with one manufacturer, even if it's Oticon, you might want to think twice and make sure that they have access to the different brands, because there are a lot of other good manufacturers out there that may be better suited for you. We would say that's doesn't happen very often, but it can. So it's a good idea to deal with an office that is a multi-brand office. Any other questions? Well, Tony, again, both Dr. Buttars and I would really sincerely thank you very much for the invitation and for having us speak to your group. Hopefully people found it somewhat interesting and informative. I know you're kind of overwhelmed with so much information from so many different sources when it comes to hearing and hearing loss. But again, I think if you find the right individual to deal with, the office that you're comfortable with, it's going to make all the difference in the world. So
Absolutely.
Thank you, and a happy Mother's Day, upcoming Mother's Day to all those mothers out there.
Well, Chalese, thank you so much. And David, you always have excellent presentations, and you bring it. When you come, you bring it. So thank you very much for that.
Well,
And,
you're quite welcome. Thank you.
I think everybody here, I'm already seeing compliments in the chat. And so
well, thank you. And again, thanks everyone for joining us, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day. Bye, Tony.
You.
Bye, Ann.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, now that we're alone, I'm going to shut off the recording. Okay.